Welcome to the Championship Club podcast. I'm your host Michael Casey, and co-hosting with me is a man with over 300 Championship rugby appearances. It's Ben Gulliver. Be sure to check us out on social media at Champ Clubs Pod on Instagram and Twitter, and head to YouTube to like and subscribe to the channel. Before we kick off today's episode, I'd like to say a big thank you to our brand new and shiny sponsor, Trojan Engineering Fabrication, part of the MFH Group, and you can check them out at mfhire.co.uk.
Vassy.
Hello.
Very formal. Let's make it a little...
Not very good at that.
No, I know. Mate, this is Mike.
Hi, Mike.
Mike normally takes the lead, but he's on the back of a 4-day bender, so he's still a bit jaded. So I know.
The only manager in town.
Yeah.
I'm happy to sit here and be just a spectator and observe this one, but no, I'll chip in. Thank you very much for joining us on the show, Ian. It's I'm quite happy to sit back and watch you two chew the fat from this one because a little bit jaded. Turned 30 at the weekend. It's been a big day for me, but it's taken a long time. I guess that's the age where your hangovers start hitting. What do you reckon, Gull?
Well, the last time I saw Vassy, he was stitching me up at his wedding. So.
Oh yeah, yeah. I was picking up the debris from the broken furniture and all that.
Yeah, mate. Let's get into it then. So I've been trying to I've obviously known you for a long time and try and touch on sort of your experiences in the Championship, but also like in Premiership, and trying to piece together your playing career to start with is a little bit tricky because there's not a great deal on there, and sort of where it started, and then how many times you're at Bedford, how many times you're at Saints, and then there's the start in there. So you just talk us through that journey a little bit, mate, and then to the Championship.
So I suppose I'll go as quickly as I can. I did the academy at Saints until 21, and then I got an opportunity to play in France. I had a choice between Sarries or Stade Francais, and chose to go to Stade with Nick Mallet there, and we actually won the top 14 that year. But then Then Nick Mallet left, and they brought in a French guy, or Gaultier, actually Fabien Gaultier, and he sort of brought with him whatever players he wanted, sort of thing. So I was put on the edge of his squad, and about early August, he just said, "Oh, well, you're not going to play. You just train and play for the second team, basically." And I was like, "Well, all right, so I'll go." And so because it was so late, I had nowhere to go at the top level anyway. So I just a couple of mates playing at Bedford,
right?
Said, "Look, do you want to? I've got nowhere to go. Won't cost much because I've just been paid out, so just all happy to play." Yeah. And so then just got a chat with Jeff Irvine and Rudy Strowley at the time, and played a year there, and probably the first time I played 20, 25 games in a year, due to either being injured or young or whatever it was. When you're in the academy, you don't really get a run of games. So then post that, signed Harlequins after playing reasonably well that year. But unfortunately, on the last day of that season they got relegated. So ended up back in the Championship with them, even though it was a good year because we kept winning.
Yeah. That at Quins then? So that was at Quins, you in the Champ?
Yeah, so I signed in the January, almost like early, because they were in the Premiership, and it was, like I said, Bedford was like a stopgap because I had nowhere to go for that year.
Yeah.
So I signed quite early, but obviously that didn't work out for them that year, and they lost on the last day of the season. So that was like, all right. So I did a year in the Championship again with Quins. Played a reasonable amount, but then we obviously went straight back up. But in between those times, Northampton changed their director of rugby, so they were keen on getting me back there. So I just spoke to Dean Richard at Quins. Was like, well, what do you think? Would I play? Won't I play? I had this offer to go to Northampton, and we sort of agreed that I'd go there. So I went there. They got relegated. So this is going well. So I did the year in this Championship with Northampton as well. And then we got promoted again. After that, went back to Bedford. By this time, the old knees were getting a bit rickety, but with a few painkillers and a bit of care, got through 5 seasons at Bedford after that, and still managed to get through 120 games or something like that. So I suppose in the end, spent the majority of my career in the Championship, even though I was with teams that probably shouldn't have been there.
We're, let's say, 12 episodes in now, Gully, and I don't think you've got to be the first guy that we've had on the show that's won the Championship twice. Definitely.
And been relegated.
And been relegated twice. Although the first time wasn't my fault. Second time maybe I got a hand in it. But yeah.
And played in a championship final for Bedford. You're in that game.
Yeah, so we won that Power Gen Shield against Plymouth, who were good back in the day. When they had the Ascots and who's a big lad, number 8, can't remember, he's a decent player.
Alfie Tuala.
Yeah, Alfie Tuala. That's it, yeah, Danville Smith. So that you must play with those, did you?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they had a decent... Were you playing?
No, I was at Cov at the time then.
Oh, right, yeah. So they had a decent squad at the time, and it was a good game because the Bedford at that time had a good set of ex-Saints players, so that it was a decent level. So we won that Power Gen Shield thing that first year. Then after that, the Bedford were pretty close to semis most years in the playoff stuff, without quite having enough depth to get to the final. With the likes of Bristol about and people like that.
Yeah. What's your view on the championship now, mate? Obviously, you've played in it, you've been involved in different ways of getting promoted into the Premiership, different formats in terms of playoffs, etc. And then obviously when the funding was there, what's your general thoughts on it at the moment?
I think it has suffered greatly from the break through not being able to prepare contract players, have depth of the squad, all those things. But I still think it's the best tool to develop players. I think it needs more time put into it, more money put into it. I think the relationship with the Premiership clubs should be developed further to strengthen those relationships and put less pressure on squad numbers. I've got nothing positivity for the Championship, having played in it, coach players and develop players who have played in it through when I was doing academy work at Saracens and that. It is the best tool, but otherwise the A-League is just a bit of a non-event. It's just giving people a game that's no real significance. But at least the Championship, there's points on offer, properly competitive against some hard-nosed teams or players, who were playing for league points, essentially. So you get proper match situations to learn from, as well as good game time, not just once every 4 weeks when an A-League game is.
Yeah, I was going to touch on when you're at Sarries and sort of you had been academy coach there and playing at Bedford at the same time and developing players.
Yeah,
there was a period of time when the dual reg wasn't quite what it is today, and the players let's be honest, didn't really want to be at their loan clubs. So how have you found a change and shift towards sort of player attitude from a younger age towards going to their loan clubs? Or is that a coaching thing, or is that just an acceptance?
Well, I think that the loan thing started maybe 7 or 8 years. I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, when it was seen as a detrimental thing. Are you going out on loan? Maybe for an older player who's not played, not even academy. And the academy wasn't really thought of. You play the A-League or maybe in the whatever, and there was the 20s league back in the day. So there was quite a bit of rugby at the club. So under 20s A-League, whatever, a bit of first team. You probably had enough rugby. But as soon as that 20s league went and the A-League, there wasn't any 17 rugby, and then they formalised the A-League. There was a niche for no rugby. So I think it was more the stigma around the loan was more from older players going, oh, God, I've got to go on loan. Yeah. Whereas we suppose as academy coaches, we sold it as it is the best development tool, going to either OAs or Old Albanians or AMPTOL or whoever it is, and picking the right level for the player to get better physically or tactically, whatever reason he needs to develop or what side of games he needs to develop. We sold it as that because otherwise there's not enough rugby to go around. In a squad of 40 senior players, and there's an A-League game, that doesn't leave a lot of room for the academy to play in second team rugby. So it's absolutely key when used properly.
So you're coaching at Northampton now, ahead of the last season as it is now in the Championship. The sort of formal partnership between Bedford and Saints was announced, the strategic partnership, and obviously a cohort of your young players go there. Just wanted to sort of like maybe talk through how that works in terms of an operational sense, how long the players spend there, how long with you at Franklin's Gardens, and what your thoughts have been now that the first season of the partnership has come to an end, like a bit of a review of how it's gone.
Yeah, well, we ran the same sort of scheme with Sarries and Bedford because, Northampton missed the trick doing this earlier, I think. and whatever soured the relationship in the past didn't allow that to happen. But obviously, it was a trick that we fell on at Sarries. At Bedford was so close to Saracens, and a good club that played a good brand of rugby with a stable base. It was the perfect sort of loan club in that sense. But coming in, I think it's the logistics of it all, really, making sure the Saints first team has 15v15 for good training sessions and quality, but make sure the individuals in the academy have trained with their loan team and are available to play as much, often as they can. And then them playing comes down to their performances then, and it's up to them how they train and play for their loan team, really. Once it's handed over, they're handed over. But it's more, I don't do it now, but Mark Copley that does the academy and Jake Sharp, they just work with the director of rugby to sort of handpick sessions and trainings that help the team prepare for the weekend. Whereas in the past, sometimes people might have dropped in on a team run day or something like that, and other players in the championship clubs were a bit snotty about it. But now they're trying to get them as much as we can, understanding that team development is as important, because you don't really want them to spend from 18 to 30 at one club. I think it's great to get out and about and work with other coaches and other team members at not all levels, but at differing levels and environments.
Do you think it's perhaps something that we might see more of? Obviously, at the moment in the Championship, funding is a big thing. Obviously, the lack of game time available to Premiership squad players, if you like, is an issue. Do you think that these strategic partnerships between Premiership and Championship clubs, whilst I know the dual registration system is being used by plenty, might be something we see maybe more formalised going forward?
I think as far as it can possibly, because I think the funding just means that to run I'm no expert on this, but to run a championship team, probably what you need, 30 players, 35 players maybe, with loans. So if it's a viable option and people put time and effort into making those partnerships work, either geographically or just on an individual basis, then I think it's got to be the way forward for developmental. And the amount of people who play Premiership rugby or England rugby or international rugby from Championship teams or loans is fairly endless. And I think there are a few, and their handling of the Championship has been really poor. And I think that their lack of understanding about how it develops players, even physios, coaches, all those things, having coached in it as well, how it develops them so they're capable of playing or training or dealing with Premiership teams is absolutely key. And I think they're just missing a trick with it. It's would be frustrating that you don't seem to get any, not to say is the wrong word, but they don't seem to be talking to people who actually have been involved or talk about how it develops players. It just seems to be taken as a given that they're in charge, that they dictate what happens. I think it's misaligned, and that misalignment will eventually hurt the Championship.
Yeah, I was going to touch on the coaching side of it and how the partnership works from that level with Saints and Bedford, and also like how it's helped your career. Steve, it's been
100%. That's part of my point. It's not just players that develop, because I initially, when I was at Saracens coaching, I went to Mark Call and said, spoke to Mike, they haven't got a defence coach. Would it be good if I went and did defence for Bedford, trying to implement some of the stuff you're doing here? So when the players go on loan, it's not a different story. We're connected with some of the stuff they're getting, hopefully with a decent level coach sometimes. And that aligns partnership absolutely brilliantly. And so Jake Sharp now does some of the attack and kicking for Bedford from Northampton, out of Northampton base. And of course that makes 100% sense. And so he's coaching academy players, a bit of stuff for the first team, but also getting some really good coaching time and tactical coaching, learning from, coaching with Bedford. Like, I've failed plenty of times with Bedford with going too far, too low, setting the bar too high, setting the bar too low, drills not being good. You just learn how to fail, basically, as the nicest possible way sometimes, or learn what works, whatever, however it is. So I thought it was absolutely key to use that partnership for the coaches as well as players.
And then your own personal development, because I was part of that as a player and sort of as a friend at the time. Sort of, defensively, I suppose the way you used to defend, it's changed massively, and then adapting, like you're saying, and flying out the line with your high shots and all.
Oh yeah, there was a.
And asking me,
well, it was so slow. You had to absolutely 100% commit to what you were doing, because any sort of change direction, you nail. So you never making that tackle. So just being ahead of the game, think 5 meters faster than your legs go. Definitely, I was unconnected to everyone else around me. 100% awful defender. But no, it's not relative, is it? Like, I'd never said, I want to coach defence, and from an early point. No. It's just sort of one of those things you fall on. There's a niche somewhere in some team. Like I said, at that point, it was a niche in the Bedford coaching that, and I was working at Sarah's. It made sense, so it just sort of fell on that really a little bit. But in most coaching teams, you get to talk attack, defence, strategy anyway. So, in a good open coaching team, so you don't sort of you don't just stick with defence really. I think it's just part of the group,
part of the title, isn't it? And then sort of you've gone. Yeah. You've sort of looking at sort of Bedford and Stars, and your defensive stuff, and then you're in your academy coach role, and then it's the England and the 20s role, isn't it? And then that's where sort of things for your coach career, like from a senior level, post that, things sort of started to move forward.
Yeah, because I think again the Saracens model really helped in that they allowed us to coach the whatever cup, Anglo Welsh, whatever you want to call that now, that sort of second tier cup. So we took that on. As senior academy coaches, so that was good to develop, to practice strategizing and working with first team players mostly, and obviously with some academy guys. That really helped. And the England thing was just one of those, I suppose, we applied again. The Saracens allow me to do a bit of both, to develop was key in that. Just applied for it and we went in pretty cold into the Six Nations with Tom Williams and Lewis Deacon. Went in pretty cold, sat around the table, and Dean's like, well, you're head coach, your backs, you're doing forwards. We're like, sweet, okay. So I sat there with the first team meeting with the doctors, medics, and as a head coach, not having, you sort of tactically could be a head coach, but now you're talking about off the pitch stuff, organising the medics and the physios, aligning the group, all that sort of thing. And slid a little bit in the deep end, but it was good. I 100% enjoyed it. And it was just a little bit the next step. I think that working with the England stuff is you end up working with the best players. It's actually a little bit easier because they are the best players, so they learn quicker and all that. So it was another step was key.
So just so like, in terms of like your own learning, it's on the job, isn't it? So you can do your reading on it, or you can go onto your courses. And for you, what's been like the biggest developmental practice and being thrown into the deep end? Is it a mix of all? I'm kind of getting that
here. Yeah. I don't think the courses are developed for the top end of the game. To be honest, they're not saying they're not informative, and they would guide a certain level of play or coach. But they're not really aligned to the professional game, I don't think, or the top end of it, the top couple of leagues at least. So although they were good to meet people on there, because you sort of have to do them. So it was good for a little bit of networking in that sense. But I never got round to doing level 4 or anything. More not by. I tried. I was going to go on it and then didn't go on it because I went to France. But in the end, I don't think it make a difference on it. But the experience stuff is it's failing really more so because it's about selection or a certain strategy that you wish you hadn't done or whatever it is, and or when you get a bit older, it's pulling something from 5 years ago that worked that you've forgotten worked, and then you're like, I should have done that. And it's just collective experience really, week by week, season by season, bit by bit, that the experience helps you get through the sticky bits as well, and not get too carried away with the good bits.
Yeah. And then you sort of you moved down to France, and now obviously you're in an English speaking coaching team at the start, weren't you? And then it's then things changed, and then you see a different side to the French.
The French, yeah. I was again. That was a bit out of the blue. Just went for the job interview, spoke to Vern Cotter sort of out of the blue. We got on, and that worked. We had a good couple of years. I think we had a good couple of years, get to the final, then became sixth, got into the playoffs. But with French rugby, you just never know. The president wasn't happy with something somewhere and decided to change it to a French guy who had no experience whatsoever. And he was fairly clueless about how to run the whole operation. So everything just fell apart, really, and from players to coaches to medics to... but that is, like you say, typically French, just employing a name and not someone who actually knows what they're doing.
And I think the best part of you being over there was the infamous Ian Vass Rosé tours.
Oh yeah, the Rosé tours were top notch as well. Lovely part of the world. That was a good hit. There was you could go home and pretty much forget about the rugby when you're at home. With the Rosé tours being very high on everyone's wish list when they got here. Go on, where are we going? Where are we going?
Mike, just for context, like there isn't a Rosé tour. It's just Vassy.
I'm sold on it anyway. It sounds fantastic.
And yeah, it's just me walking around Montpellier, going to different bars, drinking different types of rosé.
I think there's a market for it. There could be. And so
I think there was as well, yeah.
And then the opportunity to come back to Saints in a coaching capacity kind of coincided nicely, or how did that all come about?
Yeah, it was, again, I think most stuff comes really through a bit of potluck. And Alan Dickens went to the England 20s job, and that just opened that roll up. And as Gully said there, the French guy was messing about a bit, and so I spoke to the president, and we sort of agreed to do it at a certain point in the season that suited. So I think it was post Christmas post the first bit of Europe. So it's sort of a clean time for both of us, and that the timing actually worked quite well in that sense. There wasn't too much hassle, and although we sort of going to do it at the end of the year anyway, we sort of managed to bring that forward just because, again, the French politics as well. Probably better just getting out of there and getting cracking with the Northampton gig. And then COVID came along, messed it all up.
So this season then at Northampton, obviously caught the weekend's game. Heck, that was must have been a bit of a sickener to take. How has that been reviewed coming back into? Was it 18 points up, final last minute penalty loss to the Chiefs?
Yeah, it's in some respects it shows how far we've come, that we can, even with 14 players, we can match the intensity of Exeter and actually surpass it. And so that's good for the future because we've got a pretty young set of lads in there. But it probably shows where they're at in their ability to maintain their composure, their ability to minimise errors when post first half, squeeze teams and fatigue teams because of their relentlessness. And that's just a sign of a good team, I suppose, and why they are where they are and where we need to be. But the good signs of that are, right at the end there, we're still pushing to score with 14 men after 65 minutes and competing with one of the better teams in Europe. And we're probably kicking ourselves with that 10 minutes after half time where I think we just lost concentration, whatever you want to call it. There was a loss of something for 10 minutes, and then we sort of back into it and we got playing again. So that's the disappointing element. I think the good thing coming out of it was that everyone was not just happy with a good effort. We were pretty disappointed because we took a lot of time and planning during the week to get the performance, and we got most of it. But against one of the really good teams, you have to have it for the whole game.
Yeah, I watched it, and I think from the outside, and I've not spoke to you for a while, is that I watch you guys play, and I love the brand of rugby you're playing, and it's can you match a team physically? And in that first half, you matched it, and you went up a notch, didn't you? And I think it's the most physical performance I've seen from this team, and that's obviously a big part of what you've been doing there as well, mate. So,
yeah, I think in the way it goes around with defence, I think the physicality or line speed, whichever way you want to phrase that, where you're going at them, the aggressiveness is the last thing you can have. If you're not organised trying to do that, it's all pretty messy. Right. So, spend a good deal of time getting ourselves organised, and we've become a fairly safe defence, quite reliable. But that was, right, like you say, it's a different level of defence, and probably the level you need to go to the next step, where you're actually getting the ball back quite quickly because you're going so hard at the opposition in an organised way. Yeah, 100%. And like I said, it's a glimpse of where we can get to rather than where we are, and that's the positive sign of it, especially after coming off the back of last year, where although internally you could see progress, obviously the external results weren't great, but bit by bit, little by little, learning by learning, we were getting somewhere, and that sort of bore fruition throughout the year as we went through. So that's why we are where we are. we're good, but not quite good enough. But we will. I think we will be because of some of the signs we saw on the weekend as well.
I think anybody watching your game at the weekend obviously would not argue with sort of the intensity and passion that went into that final sort of late season game, but obviously there was things riding on that game. One of the sort of counter arguments to getting rid of promotion relegation is that at the end of the season you would see a lot of nothing games and sort of meaningless games. As I say, the game that you had played out with the Chief is probably not a great example of that point. But in terms of your own thoughts on promotion and relegation, have you strong ones? Are you able to share them and air them with us? Or
yeah, what do I think? I don't think it's the be all and end all, but I do think it's important that if a team has developed itself in the Championship and comfortable and winning and secure and in a good financial state, that why shouldn't they be allowed to have a crack like other teams have? Because other teams have proven that once you're in and you stay in it, you can keep going forward. The Bristol's next to this world. So I'd hate to see that door shut. And I think as long as there's ambition in the Championship, it means that league's alive. And as soon as that ambition's dead, I think that league probably dies. So I think I'm probably for it in the end because of those reasons, because it allows you to have 24 professional teams rather than 12. By minimising your professional pool, you're minimising your ability to develop more players, late developers and all that. So I think the bigger pool of players, the better. And I think promotion and relegation are key to that because, like I said, if you haven't got that many teams, you lose half your player pool basically. And half the jobs, half your developmental, half everything.
Yeah, and then in terms of a developmental, Saints is a leading example of English players and that side of it. There was the stat earlier on in the year when
I saw that. Yeah,
you had 15 English guys that were either academy or like the EPS and all that. And then we spoke with Steve Bowden about it and the Sale Sharks sort of recruitment strategy and the South African influence. It's sort of how that affects long-term development of the English game. And we just wanted your views on that side of it.
Yeah.
Your recruitment strategy, are you looking Championship or are you looking everywhere?
I think if someone is playing well in Championship and going well, you don't 100%. That is a pool of players you could contract from. Okay. I don't think I wouldn't thought you'd specifically target a Championship player. I think if they're playing well and standing out, that's a good sign. So you might have a go at trying to sign them. Like I said, there's plenty of late developers who can come through that route, as proven by Bedford's history. That amount of players have come through there. So I don't think that's true. I think the thing is that the advantage you have from the foreigners if they don't leave, whereas we have, Courtney Laws, Bigger, Mitchell, those sort of lads go to the EPS and you miss them for big periods of the game. Big periods of the season. And for a team that's trying to get towards the top, we sort of need the cream of our team to be playing regularly to maintain that level. Now, with Buys, for example, Sales model and probably Leicester a little bit now as well, it just means they've got nearly their best team available most weeks. So it's basically a competitive advantage. It's a choice and a competitive advantage. Obviously, Chris Boyd and the board have made the choice at Northampton to go down one route, which is the route I agree with, by the way. And I think it's a choice. Two different models. What can you make of it? Although in every team that goes well, you have to probably have a couple of 2 or 3 bits of stardust in there that makes a difference for you. Which I think I agree with too. I think you need that.
Yeah, you've had a couple of us here at Doncaster in recent seasons. It's been really good to see Tom James go so well at scrum half this year, and then previously Piers Francis is an ex-Donny Knight who's obviously he's gone on to international honours since moving to Northampton. So that's and there are 2 players as well that probably came a little bit later. They were sort of both mid to late 20s when they made that move, which is great to see. We are of course a Championship podcast, and this weekend the playoffs are coming up. Of course, one of your side that you coached at, Saracens, albeit in the academy, taking on Ealing Trailfinders in the first of the 2-legged playoff for promotion this weekend. Have you kept any eye on how Saracens have been in the Championship? Any thought? Obviously, it's an unusual set of circumstances bringing them to the league, but any comments or sort of any observations on their time in the second tier?
Only that I think they started the year. They had to start the year with their academy group, and they not struggled, but they did struggle actually, didn't they? The first couple of games probably showed that when you play academy or young academy players against men, it's a level. It's not level. You find a level of game, and also you're like, wow, that's 15 men and not an A-League game where it's, kids running around really fast. You actually got men running straight at you who actually want to hurt you. So I think they found out that out pretty quickly and learned from that first game. Or in fact, probably learned before that. Those little games had the reeling, didn't they, before they started? They probably knew they were in for a tough few games. But in reality, after 3-4 games, when the other lads came back from internationals, they're one of the best teams in Europe. There's no real comparison to be made in terms of quality and depth. They're a league apart. I think they'll probably win fairly comfortably, and it's not any detriment to Ealing or anyone else. It's just they're a league. They're one of the best teams in Europe. So when they're all together playing with a full squad, which they will have with the loanees coming back, nearly all of them coming back, they'd beat 95% of the Premiership, let alone the top of the Championship. So, in the end, it will probably be a mismatch. But I think they learned some lessons from some of the younger lads in that first part of the year. Good ones as well, probably.
Yeah, it's been an interesting few weeks, hasn't it, with the final and then them going up into the Prem and see where they sit next year. And then just in terms of your Saints and next season, you got one game to go, haven't you? Is it one game?
Yeah, Bath on Saturday.
And then sort of next season's goals back into a proper season, aren't we? And when
nice.
Start pre-season, and how long have you got off, and when can we get on the piss?
Well, both good questions. So we get about 5 weeks off to actually have a pre-season. I haven't had one yet with Saints. Obviously, come mid-season, and we had about 3 weeks before we played another half a season straight into another season. So it's been pretty relentless. So looking forward to a few weeks off. And on the piss bit, we need to organise, because I'm in need to have a release. Next season, I suppose, it's pretty clear, isn't it? We are in the league, and we need to be higher. So that's the goal. I think we had a little off patch that like I talked about before, but we learned quite a lot from that. We've gone upwards. We need to keep going upwards, whatever that looks like. Made a little bit harder by probably Saracens being there, but there's no reason if we find that consistently that we can't push on into the that semi-final sort of area. That's got to be the goal from after the season.
Yeah, what I meant to ask you last time I saw you, actually, and I just want to touch on your British Lions players, actually, and the influence that Dan Biggar has on your squad, and sort of the guys that you've worked with in the game, sort of his influence on that Saints group is just, like, for me personally, is he a standard driver? Because he's obviously a class operator, and last weekend he was really good. So
yeah, well, unfortunately, we've not really had him and Courtney play together very often. It's only really been the last couple of weeks they've played together because Courtney was out for so long. Of course, he drags everyone with him, really. Like, it's the work ethic during the week, the preparation during the week, onto the field, into his work rate on the field, and physicality on the field, like not shying away from anything, any sort of confrontation. Of course, that everyone looks up to that and wants to be that person and follow it. So really important to us in that sense. And then, like, with Courtney, it's probably more the way he goes about his business. Like, on the weekend, going at Exeter, being of a level of player that can go at attacks and defend and show and steal the ball. You're like, oh wow, who's this new player we got? Like, and this he's pretty good. So when they're together, obviously you get someone looking after the back, someone guiding the forwards, and you get a bit. There's no surprises. Your level of performance and intensity goes up.
And you've worked with Farrell and Biggar, who's starting at 10 in the summer.
I think they'll fudge it somehow. I think it'll be 10-12.
Fudge it.
Yeah. I don't think they've really decided how they're going to play yet. It's a bit of a mismatch in selection. So, I think they're similar. They're similar in how they go about the business, their competitiveness, their drive. they're weak. All that things, that's why they are where they are. I think they'll probably play together, at least in the first test, then probably see where they're at. I don't know really who else would play with them in the centre, Henshaw maybe.
Yeah.
Because I think what worked in in New Zealand was having the two ball players. Now I know they're not known for their ball playing, but at least if one goes at line and carries, you've got no one straight away ready to roll, and that might be important against South Africa. Even though they're probably not known as ball players, it allows you to do that like they did in New Zealand. I think they'll probably go. I think Gatland's probably trust a small group of people, and he'll probably go with who he trusts.
Mate, it's been I think it's about time, but I don't think I've ever spoke to you for this long without.
No, I'm pretty bored. I'm pretty bored of you, to be honest, as well.
I can see you jumping like fucking hell. Shut up, Ellie.
I've got a bottle of rosé in the freezer.
Have you?
Yeah, you should see the weather. I'm stood inside talking to you, and there's a bottle of rosé in the freezer.
Where's your plastic? Where's your shirt?
The shirt's, mate, it's in the bottom of the wardrobe, waiting to be unwrapped for some sort of occasion that deserves it.
Am I okay to use that as a promo on the video? So Vassy's got. Just from going to socials. You're not on social media, so you'll never see it. But
what, the first bit?
Yeah. So,
yeah.
You've just got your. I've got a picture of you in your Costa shirt.
Well, is that skinny Vassy or fat Vassy?
Fat Vassy, which was fun Vassy. So.
Oh right, see, so okay, yeah. Pretty visible when I'm skinny.
When I mentioned that we're chatting to you to Georgie, she's like, "Oh, Chiminda's coming on, it's amazing," and then just thought, "Oh fuck yeah, the beer dwarf." So I thought she said,
"Yeah, mate, use what you want. I don't care." Yeah. We only have to talk about rugby though, which is fair. It gets fairly bland. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, mate. It's been good. There's loads in there. Mike, you got anything else that needs? Did you have anything on your list?
No, mate. Just the idea of drinking rosé makes me still feel a little bit ill. So I'm more than happy to leave you to it. And no, thank you very much for coming on the show. And best of luck against Bath. It is a shame that talking about rugby gets in the way of good conversation, but I guess that's the space that we're in.
All right, no worries.
See you soon, mate.
Thank you.
Cheers, pal. No worries. Cheers,
bye, mate. Come on, then.
I'm leaving, man.
That was the Championship Club podcast with Michael Casey and Ben Gulliver. Check us out on social media at Champ Clubs Pod on Instagram and Twitter, and subscribe and like our YouTube channel.